What happens when a boy who was once doubted walks back onto the same stage that almost broke him? What happens when fear meets courage, and courage refuses to bow down? The AGT stage stood bright and unforgiving, its golden lights shining like a test of destiny. It was the same stage where dreams were born, and sometimes quietly buried. Miguel Reyes had already felt both. Weeks earlier, he had stood there as a nervous boy from the Philippines, carrying nothing but an old Elvis song and a heart full of hope. Some had believed in him. Some had not. And one man, known for his brutal honesty, had watched him carefully. Simon Cowell was not easily moved. He had seen thousands of singers. He had heard thousands of voices. But tonight was different. Tonight, Miguel was returning. Back home in a small town where ocean waves kissed the shore, people were watching with folded hands and silent prayers. They saw him not just as a contestant, but as a symbol. A symbol of every child who ever dared to dream beyond their limits. Miguel stood backstage, eyes closed. The noise of the audience echoed like distant thunder. His palms were cold. His heartbeat felt louder than the music. He remembered the whispers. He remembered the doubt. He remembered the pressure of carrying his country's pride on his fragile shoulders. But he also remembered his mother's trembling hands holding his before he left home. This time, he was not just singing for applause. He was singing for belief. The host called his name. The curtains slowly began to open. And as Miguel stepped forward into the blinding light once again, one question silently filled the air. Would this be the moment that changed everything? Miguel Reyes was not born into fame. He was born into a small coastal town in the Philippines, where mornings smelled of salt air and simple living. Their house was small, with thin walls that let the wind whisper through at night. The roof made soft noises when it rained. But inside that home lived something stronger than comfort, hope. Miguel was a quiet boy. He spoke softly, walked gently, and rarely looked people straight in the eye. But when he sang, something inside him transformed. His voice carried a depth that felt older than his years. It was warm, steady, and filled with emotion he never showed in words. Every morning, he helped his mother with small chores before school. Sweeping the floor. Carrying water. Fixing small things around the house. He never complained. After school, while other boys played basketball in the dusty streets, Miguel would sit near the shore with his old earphones. He listened to Elvis Presley songs on a second-hand phone with a cracked screen. He didn't just listen. He studied every note. Every breath. Every pause. Sometimes neighbors would smile. Sometimes they would laugh gently and call him Little Elvis. He would smile back, but deep inside, he wondered if they were laughing at him instead of with him. Miguel carried doubt quietly. He often lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, asking himself if his dream was too big for someone like him. He worried about money. About disappointing his mother. About failing on a stage so large that millions would watch. Yet every time fear tried to grow louder, music grew louder too. Singing was the only place where he felt fearless. The only place where his shy heart felt strong. Now, standing backstage at AGT for his return performance, Miguel felt both small and powerful at the same time. His hands trembled slightly. His breathing was slow but heavy. This was no longer just a performance. It was proof, to himself, that he belonged. The first time Miguel stood on the AGT stage, he carried excitement. But he also carried something heavier, expectation. He had traveled across oceans with a borrowed suitcase and a heart full of belief. His town had gathered money to help him fly. His mother had sold her small jewelry pieces quietly, without telling him at first. Everyone believed this was their moment. But when the performance ended, the applause felt uncertain. Not loud enough. Not strong enough. Miguel noticed the hesitation in the room. He noticed the way Simon leaned back in his chair, thoughtful, unreadable. The comments were not cruel. But they were honest. They spoke about potential. About needing more confidence. About not fully owning the stage. Miguel smiled politely. He nodded. But inside, something cracked. He had given everything he had that night. And somehow, it still felt like it was not enough. Back at the hotel, the silence felt louder than the crowd had been. He scrolled through messages from home. Some were full of love. Some carried hidden disappointment between kind words. He began to question himself. Was his voice truly special? Or was it just a dream built inside a small town that never saw the world? For the first time, Miguel felt alone in a room full of opportunity. The pressure of representing his country weighed heavily on his chest. He was no longer just Miguel. He was the Filipino Elvis. And that title felt bigger than he was. He feared becoming a story people would forget. A boy who almost made it. The doubt followed him into rehearsals. It whispered while he practiced. It stood beside him every time he looked at the massive stage. This return performance was not just about impressing judges. It was about fighting the quiet voice inside him that said, "You are not enough." The night before his return performance, Miguel could not sleep. The hotel room felt unfamiliar and cold. City lights flickered outside the window, reminding him how far he was from home. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For a moment, he did not see Filipino Elvis. He saw a tired boy afraid of failing again. His phone vibrated softly. It was a video message from his mother. The connection was not clear, and the sound was slightly broken. But her face was steady. Her eyes were calm. She was standing outside their small house. Behind her, neighbors had gathered quietly. They were holding candles. Not as a celebration. Not as pressure. But as faith. Miguel watched as his mother placed her hand over her heart. Her lips moved slowly, offering a prayer. In that moment, something inside him shifted. He realized he had been trying to prove himself to judges. To critics. To strangers on the internet. But he had forgotten why he started singing in the first place. It was never about perfection. It was never about being Elvis. It was about feeling alive. It was about sharing emotion that words could not hold. The fear did not disappear. But it became smaller. Miguel stood up and walked back to the mirror. This time, he did not see a scared boy. He saw someone who had survived doubt. Someone who had earned the right to stand on that stage again. The next day, during rehearsal, something felt different. His movements were stronger. His voice carried weight. His eyes no longer searched for approval. They carried belief. The stage was no longer his enemy. It had become his second chance. And deep down, Miguel knew. This performance would not be about impressing Simon. It would be about finally trusting himself.